Hello and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Jack Wood and I like to build stuff. If you haven't seen what I've been building and you just clicked on this video, this is part 3 of my boat build series. I'm essentially building myself a 15-foot sailboat for me and my friends. In today's video, I'm going to be working on the framing and we'll start to frame the boat. So in the last video, I got a few questions about what type of boat I'm building. My boat, it's a pocket cruiser, but it's called the Knot 450. If you'd like to purchase the plans, you can go to duckworks.com. They have a bunch of other designs for boats and a bunch of other cool stuff. Also, I'm not sponsored by this. That's just where I got the plans and a lot of people were asking. But yeah, so let's get to it. All right, so now that the bottom of the hull is done, we got the boys and we start putting up all the bulkheads and the frame onto the bottom of the hull. So we'll add some epoxy and do that right now. So to hold up the bulkheads, it was a little challenging just using clamps. So I also added some scrap pieces of wood. Just a little info for the future, this bulkhead is going to end up supporting the mast. So pardon the wind, but now the next step is to take the total fare, which is basically the fairing compound, and add it on both sides where the two pieces meet up. Now that epoxy is dried, this is like a type of reinforcement, so it's gonna go on this side and on the opposite side. And then when the fairing compound is dried, I'm gonna take this 4-inch fiberglass cloth and lay one strip on this side and on the opposite side just to reinforce it. I'm gonna do that to these 3 ribs right now, and then when those are dried, I can take the clamps off and do the last ribs. Using some scrap plywood, I'm making a small template so I can give the fairing compound a nice curved edge and prep for the fiberglass. As you can see, when I drag this template along the fairing compound, it'll give it a nice curved edge. You can see that the template did its job. I just need to add a little bit more compound to get it smoother. So as you can see, it's not completely perfect like over there and right here, but when this dries, I'm basically just gonna sand it down, and then when I add the fiberglass, that'll go right here. The epoxy should fill up all these excess gaps. With the back of the transom, I don't need a curved edge, so I'm just using a putty knife to apply the fairing compound. While I'm waiting for the fairing compound to dry, I'm going to put up the biggest and last rib, which is going to go right along here. It's not really the last rib, I got these 2, and then I screwed up. I got to make 2 more, but those are pretty small, they just go over there. But yeah, I'll put this guy up, get them all secured and that stuff, and then I'll get these guys up and I'll build the other 2. So. Alright, so it's been a few days and I took out all the supports for all the bulkheads. Well, the main ones. I still have one here. I gotta build another one that goes right there and one right here. But as you can see, it's all still pretty wobbly. So what I'm gonna do is add, I don't really know what it's called. I'm calling them fairing strips, but they're basically supports that go right here and go around the curve and connect at the very front. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's these pieces of wood right here, these long strips that go the full length of the boat. I'm gonna add those. I'm just gonna add this top one in for support, and then I'll add these bottom ribs right here, and then I'll get the rest of the supports in. But before I add those strips, I have to add this front piece, which goes right here. This is the front of the bow, and this will just tie in those strips of wood. So I'll attach this and get those strips of wood in, and then I'll get those ribs in. This is a little support piece that'll hopefully add some more rigidity to the bow of the boat. Alright, so now it's time to add the smaller ribs, and I found another rib that I have to reinforce with these smaller strips of wood, so I'll attach these and that one, and I'll reinforce that one and another one that goes like right here, and then I'll attach those. The smaller ribs or supports or bulkheads, whatever you really want to call them, I'm going to start to reinforce this piece, and if you don't know, this will make the little desk area. And I forgot, but I got to make one more rib that goes up right here, so I'll do both of those right now. Alright, so I got all of these smaller ribs done. So now it's time to finally attach them, and then I can turn this big piece of wood into the strips that go the whole length of the boat. Same thing as before, I'm attaching these smaller ribs with some epoxy and fairing compound. Now to create the long strips that'll tie in all the bulkheads, I'm taking this large piece of wood and stripping it down to the proper width. To make these strips, I'm just using a skill saw. For strip cutout, what I'm doing is just laying it on top of the 2x10 or whatever piece of wood this is, and I'm just clamping it down on both ends and in the middle, and then I'm just taking my pencil and tracing the line to get a clean cut. Then I just gotta cut that out and do that 6 more times. Last 4 pieces, I'm going to strip these down to the proper width and attach them to the boat, just add more rigidity. A table saw to do that. Attach these 2 strips. So what I'm going to do first is just anchor the back, fit this in with epoxy and nails and a ton of clamps, and then I'm just going to work my way down, attaching it at every single bulkhead, and eventually end up at the very top. For the very front is I sawed off a little angle right here, so when I pull it up against the front of the hull, it'll fit flushly right here. Before I attach this, I'm going to attach this whole strip, so just in case, I don't want this to like bend in either direction, so it'll stay straight when I attach both sides. And then the next step is to make more strips, but they're gonna go right here and right here. Now that the top strips are attached, I'm just going to finish attaching them to the front of the bow. I'm now heading back to the large piece of wood to cut out some other support strips that'll be installed along the bottom of these bulkheads. The installation process is pretty much the same compared to the others. Alright, so I got the other middle strip on. I didn't film this because I didn't want to bore you guys. The video is already long enough. Also, off camera, I sanded down all the fairing compound right here, so when I add the fiberglass, it'll be a nice smooth curve, make this joint a lot stronger. I just realized that with this bottom section, I can't really put this strip of wood there, because as you see, this is going vertically, so you're bending with the grain. If I were to put it right here, it'd be horizontal and you're bending against the grain, which if you've ever done that before, it's pretty much impossible and you're gonna snap the wood. Unless you have a steamer to loosen up the fibers in the wood, but I don't. So what I'm gonna have to do is cut it up, and what I'm basically doing is I'm calling this one section, this is another section, and I have 8 going from the bow to the stern. So I'm just gonna cut them to fit these sections. Alright, so now that I have the last 2 big strips cut out, I'm gonna go over here and measure the length of each section right here, and then I'm just gonna cut it out with a chop saw. Then after that, I'm gonna take the table saw and rip it down and add an angle to it, and you'll see why in the next episode. Alright, so now I have my measurements. Now it's time to cut down the strips of wood and then strip them down with the table saw. Alright, so I found a little problem. Since I have to add in these strips right here, you can see there's a gap, and I have to leave the bottom of the hole curved, so if I were to attach this, it would make it flat, doing the same thing over there and up there. So what I'm going to do is basically just cut this into like 3 separate parts and glue those down, so hopefully it'll still be curved, and I'll still add this slant, but I'm just going to have to make a lot more cuts to those, but that's fine. Alright, so now you guys can see what I'm pretty much doing, but the only problem is I have to match these angles to this angle, so each bulkhead has a different angle, except I'm lucky these 2 sections have the same angle, but now I just gotta go through the rest of it and match it up to like their sections or their bulkhead angles, so that's gonna take a little bit. I gotta do it, so I'll get to it. So honestly, I'm getting a little bored of cutting out these strips and stripping them down, so I'm gonna focus my attention on finishing this little table and adding in these support strips right here. So I'm gonna finish those first, and then I'm gonna get back to what I was doing with these little blocks. This chisel, I have to remove some of the fairing compound in order to make this piece of wood fit better. So the little table frame is finished right now, and you might be able to tell, but the front bar is kind of slanted down. But I mean, it's a bow, so it's gonna be rocking and stuff might be falling off in the future. But now I'm just gonna go on and start attaching these pieces where they go, and I only have a set amount of clamps, so I can only do a handful at a time. So I got those glued up, and I'm just waiting for the glue to dry because I don't have enough clamps to do these. And then I just gotta start cutting out section 8, 7, and 8, and then I can start working on the roof, or that's what I'm calling the roof. This is like the cabin area section, so yeah, this is the roof. So yeah, we'll start working on that when those are dried. Okay, so I know I said a lot about finishing up all the framing and stuff, but to finish up this video, I'm actually gonna work on the cockpit area, because I'm kind of running out of daylight, so and I feel like that's the quickest thing I can do without needing the clamps. So I'm gonna work on that right now and stop the video or end it right there.
Using some 1x4s, I'm stripping them down to make the framing for the cockpit.
So now that I have the U done, this will provide all the support for the seating area or the cockpit. I'm going to add these strips, which will go in these little pockets right here and right there, straight across on top of that stick and that stick, or those supports. And then I'm gonna add the supports onto this beam right here, and then add more supports right there, and then across here and right there.
So the cockpit framing is finished and it's feeling pretty sturdy. Now I'm just going to move on to fiberglassing the bulkheads.
Last week with the fiberglass, I did a test strip right here and it worked out pretty well and it's pretty sturdy. So I basically finished up the front right here, but I still have to fiberglass all the joints back here and back here. I'm gonna do that right now. Also, kind of left my boat out in the rain because I didn't have a tarp, so there are some stains like right here and some mold growing right here, so I just gotta sand that down and prep that for the fiberglass. One other thing I forgot to mention is I have to finish adding these little blocks right here, but to the front of the boat. So I'm going to be fiberglassing this joint right here. This is the top of the cot bed, which will go across right here, but I'm just gonna fiberglass this little section. So fiberglassing for the first time may be a little challenging, but over time you get the hang of it. But to start off, take a fiberglass strip and put it where you want to fiberglass the joint, or just put it anywhere you want to fiberglass it. I like to add a lot of epoxy to the base just to get it stuck down there. So here's what the epoxy looks like close up. As you can see, it is more of a clear color compared to when it's dried. This means you did it correctly, so now I'm just gonna start fiberglassing all the joints, and then I'll move on to finishing the structural supports.
Here, I'm having some help from my friend Sean. He has his own YouTube channel, and if you guys want to check it out, it's linked down in the description below.
Alright, so as you can see, we got most of the mold out, but we did take some pretty decent chunks out of the wood. But I'm fine with that because it's going to end up getting coated with fiberglass and epoxy. Like that. But now we're just gonna sweep it out and drench it in epoxy. So unfortunately, this is the end of the video, and if you guys made it this far, thank you so much for watching. All your support means so much, and I can't believe that the first 2 boat videos almost have a combined 100,000 views. That's insane, and I can't really thank you guys enough. So, I would also like to mention that the highest like comment, I will write your name inside the boat. So yeah, stay tuned for our next video. Thanks.